Okay, we're good to get started. Thank you very much for coming. This is Rodrigo Peplon. We are here with another edition of Sitecore User Group Brazil. Thanks, everybody, and let me know if you have any issues. I'm checking the Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn and Slack channel, and as we speak, I'm actively looking all those channels. Give me all the feedback you can. Thank you very much for coming. Today, I would like to bring, as usual, some introductions for us and announcements. I'll actually, a roundtable where we'll speak about some things impacting headless development. Sitecore Headless and CMS, that's our main speech today with Ishraq Al Fataftah. Thanks, Ishraq, for coming. Sitecore Headless CMS Content Hub One. We're all excited and looking forward for your speech. First, some announcements. Recently, we had the Sitecore Hackathon. The community promoted it, and 92 teams this year applied. It was amazing. I also applied that with my team as usual, the Go Horse team. We had three categories this time, and I think the categories are pretty much a good exemplification of how the headless and composability is impacting our day-by-day lives. So best enhancement to SXA headless. We had 12 submissions in that category. Best enhancement for XM Cloud, 10 submissions, and best migration module to move XP to headless, 4 submissions. And total 30 teams deliver something around the historical data of 30%. So basically around that, it's traditionally delivering something. Results will be disclosed in SUG-BR in Malaga in a few weeks, which is something different from previous years. Normally, the judges will have something like a full month to judge and see everything running. This year will be tighter, which is going to be interesting to see. We participated, myself, my two brothers, João and José Neto. It's not a coincidence that they have these names. Actually, it is a coincidence, but everybody's mixing them. Like one day in the past, Sitecore sent to João Neto the MVP prize from José Neto. And José was wondering why this, I don't have my MVP yet. It's crazy, I know. The Go Horse team is there, but honestly, it's been our 7th MVP hackathon, and the way I like it, it's the ability to spend 24 hours with your team, seeing the sunrise, the sunset, and everything in the same breath, in the same day. In the end of the hackathon, you think it's been actually more than one single day, and also the memories. It's always very interesting. So we put together a personalized connector for XM Cloud, which is a way to keep the separation of responsibilities, the content in the CMS, and the personalization business logic in the Sitecore personalized. It's a pluggable connector that you can use to easily set up in Sitecore and keep in Sitecore XM Cloud the content instead of mixing the two. And yeah, we always have a lot of fun because the Go Horse is fun. One day I will have a speech about what means the Go Horse. It's not the day today. I will just keep your curiosity growing. SUCON Europe, yeah, it's coming 23 and 24 in Malaga. I will be there. I will be there, and Josenet will be there. It's going to be amazing to see some. I'm speaking about the two because we're ARC employees, so the both of us will be there representing the company. Lots of speakers this year. I saw amazing speakers and great speeches as well, great themes. So for those who are coming, it's going to be important because there will be no Sitecore Symposium this year, right? So I think this is making the SUG-Con grow in importance as there's no Sitecore Symposium this year. Feel free, Andy and Ishraq, to just jump in and comment if you want.
You're doing fine.
Yeah, I know, but for me, it's a little disappointing. I love Sitecore Symposiums, and it's very disappointing to not be able to go there.
I was
We lost two Sitecore Symposiums for COVID, in-person ones.
I was really surprised they did that. It's always been the event that really held the community together. And
True.
I honestly think that this last one maybe wasn't even as good as some of the prior ones because we missed a couple of them. It's like everybody kind of lost that feeling. But
Yeah.
the way to get it back is to keep doing it. I wish they would. I'm pretty disappointed.
I think most of us knew each other in the past. We met each other in Sitecore Symposiums, and great memories we have from these times as well. Yes, and it's a little disappointing because even during the COVID, they still kept the Sitecore Symposiums, and we had the Sitecore Symposiums online ones, which is not the same thing, but whatever. Right, we're done. I would like to invite, already introduce Andy Ruzic to the crowd, but I didn't say his name. And thanks for coming, Andy. Uh, and he is here to join myself and Ishraq and discuss a little bit of how the site coursing, actually the composable concept and headless implementations will impact the dev experience, development experience, and also why it's important for the business user experience for moving to this paradigm. As we know, Sitecore announced in the previous symposium the incarnation of their uh, composable suite, as you can see on screen. I will not go through the details, but lots of different responsibilities managed by different entities. But how does that impact? Andy, stage is yours.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about how composable and particularly how a more front end development centric process affects the developer experience. Not going to get into a lot of detail about DevOps and all that other kind of stuff, but so much think about how it changes the development process and why that's beneficial to business users. How the people who are paying the bills benefit from the new development process. And what we're looking at now kind of is a high level view of what the old MVC process looked like. You're working in development sprints, which the customer's waiting all the way through this, right? Your development sprints are 1 to 2 weeks, and during those development sprints, your developers are working locally with old Sitecore, MVC Sitecore, big iron Sitecore. So they've got most likely a set of Docker images running, and every time they change as much as one line of code, they're restarting Sitecore. So they're in 5 to 20-minute cycles for code, compile, test, fix, code, compile, test, fix. And that's just a very slow cycle. When they're done with that, they wait to the end of the sprint, then they deploy to dev int, they do the unit tests, and then they wait for QA testing, assuming that things pass QA. Then we wait for a scheduled deployment, which depending on the organization could be anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks. So our customer is left waiting, right? The person that actually wants the work done. And this speaks to kind of the problem with this is that it's not what we call a pace layered cycle. Everything operates at the same pace. If you're doing a major integration with e-commerce that affects billing and financials and inventory management and all those things that really should go slowly, that's fine. But then I want to move the headline above the image instead of below it, or I want to add a new component, or I want to add some custom logic for an experiment. Things that should go very quickly. That is also waiting 2 to 8 weeks to get out there, and that's kind of silly. So, not silly, but it's the way how things have always been with MVC. So if we can move ahead,
Yes.
Rodrigo. Now we look at a pace layered cycle where fast things go fast, slow things go slow. And that's one of the great advantages of doing a front end build, particularly using Vercel. Because first of all, the developer cycle, even just that part of it down there in the lower right, it's much quicker, right? If I don't know if anybody on the call has ever done any development with Sitecore Headless and JSS, but you make a change, you see it instantly. There is no 2 to 5 minute cycle waiting for Sitecore to restart, right? So the developer themselves are operating much more efficiently. But what's really nice is that because it's a feature-driven development cycle and not necessarily a sprint-driven development cycle, every branch can be checked in independently and Vercel will create an entire separate copy of the entire website with just your change in it, just your branch. So you can see just those changes. You don't have to wait for every developer to finish an entire cycle before you can put something into QA. You can QA a single feature at a time. And then you can deploy a single feature at a time, a single branch at a time. So if we're doing a whole big integration with the back office and that's going to take a month to do, the customer doesn't have to wait for that to be finished in order to change a font color somewhere or add a new component. So that's to my mind, the single biggest for the business user. Business users often don't really grasp why changes to developer experiences matter to them. This is one case where it really matters to them. So they suddenly start to get some return on investment for all the investment they're making in moving from a monolith to a composable stack. So that's what that's all about. And then there's the next slide. We talk a little bit about what a feature development cycle looks like, and I touched on it a minute ago. The developer does his work, he checks it into the working branch. Vercel and Next.js create an entirely separate instance of the site that our QA people can view, approve. Then that branch gets merged up into main and deployed to the site, and without affecting any other work stream or any other branch. So that's if you want to think of it in terms of what the flow looks like, that's it. So I'm happy to chat about that a little bit, but I think it's one thing that I think every time I've shown this to business users, they suddenly get excited about the value of DevX. And in the past, no business user ever cared about DevX. So I think this is great.
You still have 3 minutes, so we can discuss this. In practical terms, of course, that means, like you said, that the changes can reach production quickly. But
Yes.
how to have that without losing control, which is the biggest fear in the previous paradigm. How can we do that without losing control of having to test everything? Why is
Right.
it possible to do this?
Well, there's still testing, right? There's still deployment controls. There's still elevation. There's still code reviews. There's still all of those things. It's just, I don't know if you're, a long time ago, Gartner put out a pretty extensive white paper and did a whole lecture series on the idea of pace layered architecture. The idea being that your development should go at different paces, right? Things that are very business critical, things that affect compliance, finance, things that should have very strict controls around them should go very slowly. And so that risk is completely reduced. Things that have lower risk and higher immediate returns, like changing a presentation component, right? Truly, what's the big risk to the business if a presentation component fails? You got a little bug on the website, you might make a couple of users mad, but you haven't affected your finance, you haven't affected your inventory, you haven't really affected your sales. It's something you can quit quickly. So the idea behind all of this is to be able to pace layer and have much tighter, even though you're still working through the same, branch, checkout, check-in, QA, code review, deploy. You're doing some of these things in a matter of hours, and you're doing others in a matter of weeks, and putting as much control around it as the cycle calls for, right? So it's low risk, high speed, high risk, low speed. If you can think about it almost like a line chart, right? It's been embraced in a lot of aspects of line of business application development, this idea of pace layering, and it's nice that we can really bring it to the marketing technology world, that we can now start to pace layer our work as well.
It's great. That's great. Well,
Forgive me
thank you
drinking
very much,
coffee.
Andy. I know this can actually, and I suppose that it's going to be very, very valuable for the community to have these expanded into a complete discussion, because the subject is really interesting and important for us. But now we're gonna switch to our main big star of the day, Ishraq Al Fataftah, that will bring to us the privilege to have the first-hand access to information on Content Hub One, and as working as a CMS, as a headless CMS. Ishraq, the floor is all yours, the stage is yours, so I'll stop presenting and give you the ability to present. I think you already have.
Okay, I think you might need to give me.
Let me see.
But yeah, that's a good segue
Make a
to my
presenter.
topic. Let's see. Right.
Rodrigo,
You
I got to
are.
say, I really love the way the Sitecore logo reflects in your glasses when you're speaking.
Really? That's cool. Was unintended. Okay,
Yes.
we can
Yeah,
see your
it's good.
screen.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think I've been back. My last time was back in 2019, I think. So it's been a while, so I'm happy. I'm finally back to present at SUG Brazil,
Glad
as
to have
usual.
you.
Thank you so much, good friend. It's not surprising that I have the same slide here as well. But yeah, it's funny because just before this, I had a meeting with a client, and we've been discussing the move towards headless and discussing some hybrid solutions, because we already have invested so much with the XP, and one of our main pain points was how we can reduce the dependency between the front-end team and the back-end team on, we have to wait until Sitecore is done. We need to wait until like controllers and VCs, whatever has been developed, made available in a branch for the front-end team to work with. So yeah, and this is one of the reasons why I've selected this as a subject, because this is where many of the conversations are going. I'm not gonna claim and say like, yeah, everyone is gonna move to this or the other, because we all know that XPXM is gonna stay, right? It's not gonna go with the introduction of composable and all of these options. What we have now is more options, rather than being stuck in one way of doing things and have to live with any limitation, right? So instead of tailoring your business towards the capability of your technical stack, we're talking about, okay, my business can have a vision, these are my needs, and then I can pick and choose from any tech stack out there what's best for me. And this is what we can see still relevant. Like, yeah, we have stuff around engagement. We still want to create experiences, right? This is still one of the, like selling points for Sitecore or for any DXP solution, is being able to do personalization, testing, and all of that. Commerce for sure, but you can see we have a big layer of different options for content. And this is what thinking about your project or solution or website, between having a headless application or having to deal with a headless product, because both of them might be different. And this is where, as you discuss your next year plan, next 3 years, 5 years along the line, because these are most of the conversations that we've been doing for the past couple of years. And basically for me, like since last year, one of the main things that has been hot with most of our clients is like, today we are here and we've been hearing about all of these new cool stuff. We want to be there after a couple of years, but what does it need for us to go from A to Z, right? And at the same time, is it the right thing for us because we don't want at the same time to be in a position where, because this is the next hot thing, we just need to jump on that. So if you think about, I'm not going to say like the future, but how the digital ecosystem today looks like, this is where most of the discussions are happening, right? We all talk about headless, whether it's in its, hybrid sense, like we've seen with JSS. And I have my interesting view on JSS has been in the journey working with some clients when we had 9, and I'm pretty sure most of you have already followed the Sitecore journey, moving from that to being coupled with SXA and then moving into JSS, our service, headless service layer, and doing this decoupling, and then moving to having XAML Cloud that initially we thought that's going to be the Sitecore headless, but then they released Content Hub One. So it's pretty much speeding the way towards headless. And when you talk about headless, you need to think about your content and everything. Or I'm going to say like our own company's website, we've changed that before the introduction of Content Hub One to a headless CMS, and we built that with Next.js and with Vercel. And it's been a huge learning process because working with Sitecore for so long, the way we perceived any development life cycle is I have a design and I have a page to create that design. I have to build it in Sitecore and I have to create my content around the concept of a page, around the concept of a design, right? But when we talk about headless or headless product like a headless CMS, our way of thinking needs to be doing a separation between both of them. Because having a headless CMS means you have to think or having content first approach. So everything is built around the content, and the page orchestration of how it looks like doesn't matter anymore. Headless CMS doesn't give you the capability of building a page. And as we've seen, like with the move towards headless, and we've been working with JSS, we've been consuming APIs. So the concept around APIs has no longer been limited, like, yeah, I'm going to consume a third-party API because my business requires me to connect with this system and that system. So it's more present, and development nowadays is like, yeah, I do my separation of my code onto services. I remember back, was it in Sitecore 9.0? I can't, something around that time. So it's before all of these things, and we're working with a car dealership. So basically, we connect to a car system. Our website would fetch the car model, the make, the interior, the exterior, and all of this is stored in a third-party system. And the way we've done it back at the time is having a .NET Core project. It hosted all of our services, and we've made call from the website to that .NET Core project that handled everything that has to do with that car dealership system. So the concept has always been there, and this is how it evolved over time. Whether you're consuming your API, returning a JSON, a GraphQL, it becomes more of a norm for everyone rather than something as a backend developer you have to learn. And this is something I want to also touch base as I talk more about this, because one of the main concerns that we typically hear is that from a resourcing perspective, like the capacity that I have is more on the backend. This is where typically most clients or agencies would have, is like, I have a big pool of backend developers and I have a couple of front-end teams, and eventually, like, does this mean my backend needs to turn into a front-end? Do I have to hire more front-end developers? So all of these makes or breaks sometimes the design of your architecture or the tech stack that you're going through. So we're going to see like where some of these conversations can be challenged. And yeah, Jamstack architecture, something we've been hearing for the last couple of years as well, and it's been more prominent as we think more and more about as as Andy and Rodrigo mentioned about having Vercel, or any of these ways of generating static HTML, right? Now we have seen firsthand how I can get a very, very speedy site delivered in a way where I can dynamically inject my content. And even that takes me the next step, which is like creating multi-experiences. We still want to do personalization. So we evolve towards how I can, even my head is in a different application, so I have a total separate application for my website and have its generated HTML and it's cached in a CDN or whatever, but I still want to be able to deliver personalized content, right? So this is how even more and more offering has been evolved around the experience edge and thinking about new ways of delivering that. And again, everything is on the cloud. So this reality is what we can say, like our reality in the past couple of years. This is not as of today. And many has already heard about the Mac architecture. Every time I go to LinkedIn, I see something around that, right? And this is where it becomes interesting. This is where when you think about your best implementation and some of the enhancements that you can do and where you can place your tech stack in terms of your own resources, where I find it very interesting and useful. So a client that I work with, they are a commerce website. So they have been working with Oracle maybe for the past 20 years, and they finally decided to move from that and adopt something new. And their journey started while we were doing an upgrade from 8 to 10. We took over some technical debt as we typically do, and it took some time. So by the time we were ready to launch to production, the entire commerce has been developed and integrated with the new system. They are ready to test a new ET. So we started to have this gap. So our production, our facing is still consuming the old Oracle stuff. UAT, now we have to be quick to develop changes to match UAT because UAT is broken. So we've been in this like dilemma of we have to freeze everything, it can't do anything on a production, and I have a broken UAT. And somehow, because typically we work in different teams, right? We have the website team is different than the commerce team, is different than the marketing team, and all of these kind of stuff. And definitely at a certain times there's going to be gap. So we have been in this dilemma of what would be the best way of handling that. And when we look, and I'm bringing the commerce example because it's easy to think about it as a smaller or as a standalone functionalities. You can have your loyalty system, right? You can attach to Shopify, for example, loyalty system, or you can have your own. Same thing with your checkout process, same thing with your add to cart. So these can be easily developed having a microservice into account. So I can have a fully functioning module that can be released, deployed at any time, right? And if we're adapting more and more service-based API-first approach, this means I can have my API manager handle which service I'm going to call, right? So my API manager would say, like, I am in UAT, then please consume the services that are connected to the new system. While if I am in a production, please connect to the services that are connected to production, and that one to the UAT. So sometimes when, and again, for the most part, we inherit lots of old implementations, right? And there's lots and lots of constraints and consideration that we take into account as we move, as we evolve our development and architecture practices and all of that. But it's really important that even if you're overtaking like a brochure website, and we'll do a quick comparison, there is like a brochure website, it's just quick, couple of static pages or content pages and we're done, right? I would typically start with a single language and down the line, 2 to 3 years, we suddenly supporting multiple languages. The site doesn't support fallback. The site doesn't take into account multiple, shared resources. So yeah, sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's right to hit, because we want to deliver, we want to meet deadlines, but always keep in mind that the business, the market, everything is evolving and evolving very quick. So in our case, to add to that, they wanted to release the new system only to the US market, and the rest of the world has to still working on the old Oracle stuff. So thinking a cloud by leveraging, for example, the application gateway to filter traffic. So if traffic coming to the US, we're hitting the API manager at this point. If it's coming from the rest of the world, we're hitting this. So everything is done in a server level. You don't have to put switches on and off, some configuration in the code that says like if else, or if I'm in this environment, do this or that, and even any type of configuration. And same goes to location. We don't have to worry any of that. Everything is done on the cloud, and this is where we see many implementations. Like, I think I've only worked with a client recently who had like an ES environment, and they were so desperate to deprecate that and just move it as a microsite, to an existing PaaS implementation, because no one wants the headache of doing that. And obviously, all of these just line very easily when you want to adapt a headless approach, right? Because your application can easily interact with your backend, with your Sitecore instance through APIs, through all of these layers. Now, this is where we're heading. This is where most of the current implementation that we're saying are. But now, think about this as your product. So with Content Hub One, the CMS itself is being built on the premise of having a headless approach to it. And it's been developed like a lightweight XM cloud version of Content Hub. It allows you to shift your focus from how the page is going to look like, how we are going to deploy this content, how am I going to deliver my personalized content, into just thinking about your CMS as a place for content author to think about content and content only. And I'm going to say, like, working with that, it's a challenge. And it's challenging because spending so much time thinking about how a page is laid. Let me leave this for a minute. So this is the dashboard for Content Hub One, or as it's called, Home. As everything in your Sitecore, let me put this up. We have to learn a new terminology, so I'm going to be throwing a couple of terminology here and there. You can map it to what you know about traditional. I'm going to call it a traditional just because it's the old way of doing things with XP. So we have this homepage. It gives you the opportunity to model your content. So basically, it's like creating the template for your content. You can author everything that you have, can obviously upload media, and there's an area for your dev team to create all the keys and all the settings that are needed for all of these APIs. So still working with APIs. There's a quick links for documentation, and a nice thing I like about this is there's a direct link to report an issue with this. So being a SaaS product, it means it's handled from A to Z by Sitecore. They're responsible for rolling out updates. They're responsible for any issue that happens. So if you create a support, they know exactly which version of Content Hub One you're running. They have access to it, and they can help you roll out things quicker. So yeah, as I was mentioned, the difference between going from a content to design first approach is that the first thing we think about when we develop a website in a traditional way is like what design system we're using, right? Are we gonna develop components as atomic components, or is it something that's I'm not going to consider a button a component. I'm going to look at it from a molecule perspective. So my CTA, the smallest functional component is an image and a title and a description and a button, versus if my button itself is a component. We think about these details because it maps to how we structure content in Sitecore. We depends heavily on more of like what you see, what you get, right? So when you orchestrate or when you author a page in Sitecore, you have the experience editor to look at it, to map it and see like how it's going to look like. And this is the design approach, and it reflects even how we define Helix, right? And I think I've seen on the Slack channel a couple of days back some discussion again about, when we create Helix, the discussion around how many projects we're going to have. So we've seen implementation where some would go into having components themselves as a Helix project, right? That kind of an atomic approach to implementing things. So it's not only going to affect your content tree, doesn't only affect how you create data sources, it also affects your code, right? This is what we are used to. But when you switch to a content-first approach, we're completely ignoring the design. It means your content team has to focus on not only developing or authoring the content, they're responsible for modeling it. So as a developer team, you would be typically responsible for creating templates, right? In Content Hub One, we have a different kind of roles. So you have a content modeler. These are who are responsible for creating the model for your basic content. You have content authors responsible for filling content and publishing. And developers obviously can be any of the above, but they are also responsible for the APIs and integration back between the application and the Headless CMS, right? So your content modelers in this case, and whomever is assuming that that role, they have to think about their content regardless of how the page is going to look like. So a news or a blog page have to be like that big chunk of content, because this is what you're going to be deliver, a big JSON object, a big XML file to your front-end team to display. You don't have to worry about, no, I'm going to use here a header, here a footer, all of that. No, they just go into it through a content-first approach. They don't care about anything else. And the architecture is pretty much simple, and it's changing our overview of the infrastructure that we're going to maintain in the future. Nice thing about this, it's still relative to what we've learned about Headless and all of these things, let's say the journey towards what we have today. We have our Content Hub One CMS, which is our Headless, right? This is where all the content modeling and authoring is happening. We have, instead of a content delivery, right? So I'm going to say again, traditionally with Headless, you have multiple ways of achieving that, right? You can either still use your CD as your headless server. So basically you're still doing CM and CD and you host all your application in the CD. Or you can go through a reverse proxy. You have your node server, everything is, the front end is done there, and they connected through APIs either to a CD or to a CM. You have either option, right? But this concept of the CD has changed and broken down into two of these layers. So we have what's called the delivery edge for the content and media delivery for the media. We're going to talk about that. And on top of it, we have the CDN, which is responsible for caching and giving you this, as we've mentioned about the Jamstack architecture and static site generation, give you that level. And underneath all of this, it comes the content management APIs. These are the APIs that either consumed by the Headless CMS itself or consumed by you to get that content, because you have operations that's done in the CM, like creating items and creating media and all of that. And you have operations that's been done to retrieve all of this content. So how does it work? The Content Hub One concept still maintains these content management and delivery, but now the context has changed. So when you think about content delivery, you're no longer thinking about a CD in the traditional sense, right? We now think about it as a delivery edge and as a media, as a raw content, and let's say like personalized content delivered for me on the edge so I can consume it, right? It doesn't have that equation of a CD to have a full XP instance or X-Connect and all these things. And our content management is where your content creation and storage done. This is handled by your content creators, and this part is handled by your front-end team. So your front-end team would be responsible for consuming everything that comes from this layer. We're going to talk about the back-end developers because, that role is not going to go, hopefully, anytime soon. But, all right, so just from looking into the architecture, so the main elements of Content Hub One is content modeling, content authoring, and content delivery, right? And a content modeling, again, is just the concept of creating the basis or the outline or the structure for your content with complete isolation of the design. So again, we've mentioned new product means new terminology. Now we call it a content type, which equates to our templates, right? So a content type is the building block in Sitecore Content Hub One. It represents the category or the entity that you're trying to build your content strategy around. A content type means it has a field, and these fields represent, as we know, string, image, whatever, and then there is some relations between them, because at the end of the day, by using this headless CMS where I'm only focusing on content, there is a number of design principles that I still need to keep in mind. And these content modeling design principles are still similar to what we know, but it focuses more on the intention of the content piece that I'm creating and how easy I can reuse it and use it across multiple content types. Because at the end of the day, if I can create, I don't know, let's say an author section that can still be used in a news and in a blog as a content modeler, because remember, traditionally developers or a system admin or Sitecore admin will take care of modeling and creating the templates and the structure of the fields and everything, but now we have this modeler, and this modeler could be still an author. So they have to have this understanding of how they can structure this content in a way where they can still do mapping of relations, they can get into reusability, and they need to think about validation as well. Because and this is an interesting point, because this is one of the challenges I personally faced when I was working with the Headless CMS, is that I'm creating content and I'm only thinking about content, and I no longer see it in front of me in a preview mode. I only see it when it's published to the site. So I have to go to the site to see how that looks like. I don't have the luxury of seeing it as I'm authoring, right? And sometimes I would miss the entire component because I did not take that into account. So the basic validation or the basic principles of dealing with any content has to be also part of the content modeler journey. And this is why in that Content Hub One introduction slide, it mentioned they have to be tech savvy. And we mean by tech savvy is they can understand these concepts and they can translate it themselves, because we don't only have an author who comes into a CMS like WordPress and just add content. No, they have to do more things. So just a quick walkthrough on the different screens that we have. As you can see, we have a very slick, very slim version of a CMS. You have the home, you have the content types, just a list of the content types represented in your website. Normal, let's say, process. So this is a nice thing about this, is like the experience that we have learned over the time is still consistent. So you can go ahead and create on adding a feed. You'll give it a name. You give it an ID that's going to equate to what your front-end team going to be requesting this field, right? You can define the different validation and different settings that are required for this component. As you can see, you can reorder them. You can delete. You can almost do everything that we're used to. Nothing new about that. Yeah. Content authoring process. Again, it's what we know as going through the authoring process. Same thing. It's at the top. We have content, which is a representation of all the content types that you have. So obviously we have a filter on the type that I want to display. I have an option to search, and I have the option to add new content, and you get a visibility on different. Again, nothing fancy about that. I have the ability to author content, pretty much nice, clean interface, nothing related to design or any of that. I can't just get in there, you get your validation, you get everything that needs to be taken into account. And then you have the media section, same concept of what we have and what we've learned, right? So this is a nice thing. When you move to something like a Content Hub One, it's pretty much you don't have to spend time on training. It's actually as easy as you can see. So we've talked about content modeling, content authoring, and now content delivery. And I feel like I'm struggling with this. Okay. Content delivery, as mentioned in the architecture, right? So we are now talking about your delivery edge or your media edge. So as a Content Hub One, I'm going to publish all the content types, all the content models that I've created to the delivery edge, right? And at the same time, for the media that I've uploaded, I'm going to deliver it to the media management system, and my website will be interacting through this. So there's no link between the website and the CMS. And this is a difference that you can see, like with JSS, the configuration would allow you to even direct a query against the CM instance, right? You have that option. But with this one, this is how the workflow goes. Everything is done and delivered at the edge. The process of making sure that these content models and content is available through workflow. The difference is you draft, you publish, right? So now it's available on the delivery edge. This is what it means by publishing. So it's not available in the web database. It's rather available at your edge. If you made any changes, it goes into a change status. And this means now your edge is behind what is in your CMS, right? So you have to publish it again to make it available at the edge and go through that. Now, from our perspective, right? So where the developers fit with this new architecture or how this CMS works. So we have, let's say, an exposure into two types of APIs. So Content Hub between itself, like between doing the modeling and consuming the APIs that gives you the headless capabilities, we use APIs. And then once everything is available at the delivery edge and the media library, we have HTTPS. So this is the type of APIs that we're consuming at this layer between the applications. So this is the front-end team consuming HTTPS APIs at this level, and then everything is an API. So what the difference between the two? First, like in Content Hub One, there's a settings section. As we talk about APIs, then obviously we have keys and we have some settings that need to be put in a place to manage the different interaction. And you can have two types of these keys, a delivery and a preview. So this means a delivery, it's been published and made available on your edge. A preview, it means it's still in the changed status. If you just change the keys on your API, you can still see unpublished content until it's made content, but like you have the option to do that between, for example, your AT and production. So two different sets of APIs you can work with, and they have different underlying implementation between your delivery layer, right? Because we have the experience edge, which only interacts with this set of APIs, and it's the delivery API, and the preview API. And for your media, right, we interact with a different set of APIs, which is the upload and delivery. The stack of this is different between, like within the Content Hub One, or between your front end, you're consuming a .NET or normal APIs, while between your customer application, we're using the JSS rendering SDK. So at the edge, the distributed GraphQL that we have, it's an edge geo-distributed GraphQL endpoint, and as mentioned, you have the option to go between a delivery and a preview. So these are our GraphQL APIs between your application and the delivery layer. And then for the content management APIs for, batch upload, bulk upload, if I'm gonna, run a batch to upload content, if I wanna run batch to upload images or any of that, we have an open API-based APIs from Sitecore. It's developed with Swagger in it, so you can have a visibility of what options you can use to manipulate the content in the Sitecore. Content Hub. And finally, we have the CLI. And CLI, as we all know, can help us easily to do these manipulation, do serialization, packaging, and moving between one environment to the other. So it's normal to what we know about CLIs within the Sitecore context. Nice thing about this approach is that with your GraphQL HTTPS-based APIs, you can work with any head, right? You can use with Next.js, you can have a React application, Angular, whatever fits your needs. So your front-end tech stack doesn't have to be changed, and you still have your backend developers' knowledge to work with other stuff based on your need with the open API standard-based APIs. Now, let's say it's not more like a why would I go with Content Hub One, but it's also in line with what both Rodrigo and Andy discussed at the beginning. There's always a business value that we can get out of moving into SaaS and into some sort of single bare burst products, because with that composable diagram that we have at the beginning, it's purposely saying these are content, these are commerce, these are engagement, right, or experience, because it allows you as a business, okay, I'm focusing on delivering campaign landing page modules very quick, and I don't want to wait until the dev team change priorities or until I'm waiting the APIs and the DevOps cycle to mature or to be ready, right? I want to have a quick win. My quick win is to deliver a campaign landing page very quick without having to wait on all of these. Technical, again, they are countless in terms of learning the new way of doing things, being more innovative and deploying your skill set into a right place. You don't have to worry about, creating templates in Sitecore. You're more focused on how you're going to consume it in more beneficial way that allows you even to integrate your application with various systems without having to worry about, if something matches what you have done in Sitecore. Now, when will you use any of these offerings? That's an open discussion, and I think I can end the discussion at this point, and everyone is more than welcome to jump in here and give their take. But for me, the XM or XP is still out there. It's not going to go. We have lots and lots of complex systems and structures that actually requires you to have all of that, to have more control. We've worked with financial institutions that require more, like some of them, they don't even allow you to go out of their LAN. So you can't go into a cloud-based approach. So this is still going to be there. It's going to continue. XM Cloud, same thing. There's some implementation for it. For Content Hub One, I would go with it for quick wins, for simple projects that focus on content. You don't have to care about, presentation. And yeah, back to you, Rodrigo. These are just like some thoughts on what we have.
Thank you. Till today, we can see people programming in COBOL back in the banks, big institutions.
Yeah.
I started life as a COBOL programmer.
Jealous. See, I know people who's living like, some very experienced people who is living worth of, a lot only with these technologies. I think there's a lot of big code base out there, and it's very hard, if not impossible, to just throw away everything.
Yeah.
Some companies will be able to do that effort and implement, others won't. I know some people in the community who is critical of not having supporting in the XM Cloud for MVC, allowing you to port whatever you have, but understand why they do that, because they don't want to be hosting all that, right? They just will be hosting the data itself and give back data. Yeah, I think this is future. I had a good experience, introduction experience to XM Cloud during the hackathon. It's great to see this thing is finally evolving, because I believe Sitecore is a little late in these adoptions when you look to some other platforms. Thoughts, Mr. Andy?
Yeah, I think that the idea of making content management fit into the landscape as though it were a microservices platform, as part of the microservices landscape, makes abundant sense. It makes a tremendous amount of sense, because I've spent the last year doing a project that wasn't even a Sitecore project. I mean, it had Order Cloud, but really what it was about was building a line of business microservices architecture and then a presentation layer on top of it for a customer who knows that their customers are going to be evolving towards consuming an API instead of consuming a user interface, right? And to Ishraq's point earlier, which I think is absolutely critical to this, everybody wants to reuse what they already had. Everybody that's doing a new project wants to say, oh, how much can we reuse? If you move into this kind of architecture where you verticalize the pieces of it, right? This is my content hub. This is my line of business API. This is my commerce API. This is, some of that might be outside platform. Some of it's custom developed, but it's all part of an API landscape, right? Well, now all of a sudden you've actually built a system. I don't like the word reusable. I don't think that that's a practical way to look at it. I think it's repurposable, right? You're investing in components that, as the technology evolves and as your needs evolve, you can repurpose things that you've already done. Does that mean that your API that you built to support your existing user interface automatically works for what somebody wants to consume it for at a data layer for other purposes? No, you may have to adapt it. There's a lot of very clever things that we can do with request and response headers that tell the API what kind of model to return depending on what front end is consuming and things like that. It's something that you build upon instead of something that you have to discard and start over. There's going to be some of that. There always is going to be some of that. There's going to be some things that are 100% reusable, and there's going to be some things that are in between. Right, and so that's why I think Sitecore is doing the right thing by saying, you know what, we don't want CH1 Content Hub One to even know or care about the presentation layer. It doesn't know, it doesn't care. It's about content. It's about content modeling. It's part of your API infrastructure. It is part of your microservice infrastructure. Treat it as such. It makes tremendous sense.
At the same time, it comes with some, I would say, growing pains.
Oh yeah.
Ishraq mentioned how much she sometimes miss the visual, what you get,
Yeah.
presentation, experience, details, whatever that you do visually. And business people would normally love more than we do this kind of things. So it's interesting to see how the technology is imposing a little bit of a little worse experience, I would say, or no experience at all, because there's no additional experience right there, only content, like you said. We
It's
have
the
a
project that we worked on. I just to say that we had exactly that dilemma. And the way we solved that was to say, we're going to organize the back end feature development around the front end designs. We're going to piece the front end designs apart. We're going to say we need these components, we need these data points, we need this, that, and the other. But the back end developer's task was to say, all right, how do I build that in a way that is not centric just to that front end? It supports the needs of it. We're going to do this part of the site first, this part second, this part third. But when I build this, I'm using the principles of repurposability when I build it. So you don't get to ignore the immediate concern of what the front end needs, but you also don't get to just wallow in that and forget everything else. Sorry.
nice. I do have a few questions for you, Ishraq. Let me know if it's getting late for you.
It's good.
We are 1 minute over, but I'll try to be quick. What is the process to get access to Content Hub One Sandbox?
Contact your sales rep.
I knew that answer. Right. From the API reference perspective, are Content Hub One and the regular Content Hub One the similar or the same?
They share the basic, so it's built on top of some of Content Hub stuff, but they're different. So even the Sitecore documentation and all of that, you have a whole set of APIs, a whole set of new things. So yeah, don't, because it shares Content Hub doesn't mean it uses the same underlying APIs.
But I feel it's a fair confusion because it even they mentioned that you can upgrade from Content Hub One to Content Hub by buying a license. It's unblocking easily. So I think they share some backgrounds or some things in the
Yeah,
shadows.
yeah, they say it's built on top of Content Hub, but like don't think about it from the Content Hub perspective, like because the options that you have are different. So like the service, the headless service layer can be shared between your .NET Core and your JSS, right? So there's aspects of that we're hitting the same interface, but we're handling it from two different perspectives. So the content part could be similar to underlying implementation of some of the content in Content Hub One, but we're not exposed to the big realm of everything that you get in Content Hub.
Yeah, I think
Right.
that they repurpose some of the underlying storage and retrieval engine, but the modeling and access layer is totally different. So
Yeah,
the idea of being able to move from one to the other, I think, is
yeah,
impractical.
Mm. They do have at least GraphQL, the same syntax,
Yep.
just like XP and XM Cloud also has GraphQL. So in theory, if you model the contents identically and you transfer the data, you can quite of reuse some
Yes.
things. And that matches
Remember,
one of the questions. Yes.
yeah, so now remember before even XM Cloud and all of this, at a certain point, they were looking into Content Hub to replace XP, if you want to go into,
True.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's been something at some times.
Yeah. The interesting. Yeah. The question was to migrate and like reuse code in XM Cloud if you move from this to that, because the market that Sitecore is doing today is you can start small with Content Hub One, and as you need more control over your content, you will be able to use content operations, content ops, which is part of the Content Hub stack. And if you need more and more, we have for you XM Cloud. but I think it's easier said than done.
I think the big question is do you want content editor visual WYSIWYG presentation management? If you do, you're XM, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, you're Content Hub One. If you want to go beyond that and have that UX layer for experimentation and segmentation and all that stuff, now you're all the way up at XP. But I don't think we're supposed to say out loud that there's not an upgrade path from one to the next, right? It's more along the lines of, oh, you can have this or you can have this, but you're not going to get from here to there without a migration that's not unlike a migration from one vendor's product to a different vendor's product. You're going to have to migrate. I always like to say it's not a migration, it's a conversion. A migration is when ducks take off somewhere and ducks land somewhere else, and a conversion is where ducks take off somewhere and geese land somewhere else, right? Going from XM or from Content Hub One to XM is going to be more like a conversion than a migration.
Yeah, I mean, like when you're talking about migrating from XP to XM Cloud, and you just had that discussion around personalization rules. Right? How are you going to migrate all of that to XM Cloud? And the discussion about the premise of even the concept of rules is different in XM Cloud than in Sitecore XP. And there's still like some nuances here and there that like, yeah, it seems like there's a path there, but it doesn't mean it's going to be 100% doable.
Right.
But,
Some concepts are going to change.
But the old rules still works in the XM Cloud. At least I saw that working when I run it locally. So I think they're keeping.
Some of the session-based stuff does the things that have to do with time of day and stuff like that. But the stuff that has to do with experience does not translate because you're going to a different tool for that. And some of it moves, some of it doesn't. You have to accept it. I don't know who originally said it, but was in the course of a long journey, one must be prepared to occasionally abandon one's luggage. Right? It's a journey, and you are going to have to abandon some of your luggage.
Nice. Maybe I'm too attached to my luggage, and that's why our team has built the CDP connector for XM Cloud, because that allows you to set up the content presentation of content separated from the business logic for the personalization, but still doing that in a similar way that people are used, at least that I'm used to. I know you guys are as well. Okay, I think I have no questions anymore from the audience. Let me know if you have final words. Ishraq,
It
was amazing to have you again.
It's amazing discussions. I miss these kind of things, so looking forward to see you as well at SUG-BR. Thank you.
See each other there. It will be amazing. Thanks, Andy, and
this was fun
to be part of this discussion. You really enriched the whole thing. And thanks everybody. Thanks people who joined. It was amazing to have you here. Eyes ahead on April, where the next Sitecore User Group Brazil edition will take place. See you all there. Bye bye.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone.